Hi, this is just a straight up and down how other drawing tools work in Illustrator. I'm not going into a lot of detail on the pen tool because I went into a lot of detail on it in the last video, so please check that one out. And here we go. Yeah, so we're mostly focusing on kind of this section of tools, minus the text tool, which we learned about a couple weeks ago. We are going to, we've already learned about the pen tool. You click and drag to make anchor points with handles, and you click to make just anchor points that are corners because they have no handles. And when you come back around, um, you'll get a circle next to the anchor point, which means that it will be a closed shape. Something that I forgot to mention in the pen tool video is that if I've ended the line, there will be a star next to my pen tool, and that means that it's going to start a new line. And if I want to continue an old line, I can do that, and a slash will appear next to my pen tool. So a lot of the other tools also follow those rules: the star, the slash, and the circle, right? Star means new line, slash means continue line, right? Now it's attached to that shape again, and circle means close line. All of the shapes that we'll make today can have their fill and stroke affected over here, right? Fill is the one that has a solid center, and stroke is the one that has a black outline. And we can raise the stroke up in the properties panel up at the top as long as you're in the layout view of Illustrator. The curvature tool, which is right next to the pen tool, looks really similar to the pen tool but acts a little bit differently. It basically automatically makes curves instead of making straight lines. So when you just click with the curvature tool, you automatically make curves. If you want to make straight lines, you can double click. Or click and then click again. Seems like it has to be a double click. And I double clicked on that one to have those two arcs meet at the corner there. So this tool might be a lot easier for some of you. It doesn't require you to understand how handles work, and it's still a very precise tool. Below that is normally the line segment tool, which makes lines, just straight lines. And you click and drag to make the lines for this one. If you just click, it will ask you, how long do you want this line, and in what direction should the line go? And with this tool, the tools underneath it, and all of the shape tools, if you just click once instead of clicking and dragging, all of them have options, right? So if we go to the spiral tool and just click, it will give us some options about the spiral, and we can adjust those. Or if we want to make a rectangle that's an exact size, we can type in 2 inches and 2 inches. Right? And that should be exactly 2 inches by 2 inches. Yeah, so same thing for any of these shape tools, and all of them, like the star tool, if we want a star that is more than the standard 5 stars, or 5-point star, like the American flag star, we can do a star with more points. Or if we want a specific type of polygon, we can say we want just a triangle, just a 3-sided polygon, right? And there it goes. So getting used to all of those is important. I wanted to briefly talk about the shape builder tool before moving on to some of the other kind of more standard drawing tools. The shape builder tool allows you to add and subtract from any shape that you've drawn. So let me lower the stroke because it's really thick, and we are going to put just like a random color on this, and we'll make that should still be a triangle because that's the setting we chose. And I want to rotate this, but it's not letting me. Interesting. We can grab another shape, any other shape, or you could draw a custom shape. And if we needed to, or if we wanted to, we could subtract these shapes from each other. Okay, so if we move to the shape builder tool, which, yeah, it should be on the top of the pile, we can merge these shapes together by just clicking and dragging a line through all of them. Now they're all one shape. Or we could remove parts of a shape by holding Alt, and see it gets a little minus sign next to it, and then when we click and drag through, it removes that shape. So you can get pretty detailed that way, right? We could make a bunch of tiny teeth marks out of the side of this. This is a totally valid way of drawing. You have to select everything first with the black selection tool, move to the shape builder tool, and then if I want to subtract, I hold Alt and click and drag. Make sure I get all the little areas in there. We can also, of course, adjust any of the shape tools. So if we wanted to make a flower out of this, let's choose a nice flower color, not this ugly green. We can grab the direct selection tool, and like we can convert this anchor point to be a corner anchor point up at the top here. You can always convert your anchor points back and forth next to the word convert. So we click on the one that looks like a corner, and if we want to, we can adjust these anchor points so that they are pointing outwards a little bit. All right, now we could just copy and paste this petal. Come on. And rotate it, and then do that again, right? Copy and paste it and rotate it all the way around until we have all of the flower petals. Or we can use the rotate tool. So it's right here. There's also a reflect tool which will mirror things, but the rotate tool, if we alt click where we want the shape to rotate around, so in this case like the center of the petal, I guess. So I'm going to I'm holding down Alt and I'm clicking there. We can, let's check off preview so we can see what it's going to do. And hit copy. It didn't work. Oh, it's because we didn't have it selected. Select the shape with the black selection tool. Grab that, grab the rotate tool, hold Alt, and click on the anchor point. There we go. And we want to adjust this until it looks like it would be like just overlapping the original. Yeah, maybe a tiny bit more than that. And then we're going to hit copy. And we can keep doing that, Alt clicking on the center and hitting copy until we have a flower all the way around. And then we could draw another shape in the middle. One more, I guess. It's not going to be quite even. If I had done some math about how many rotations I wanted and all of that, it might have been better, but we can always fudge it here. You can use your arrow keys to adjust things on the keyboard. Um, okay, so yeah, we could then draw a nice little circle in the center here. Um, yeah, or if you've, just to talk really quickly about the reflect tool, if you've ever drawn half of something, like if you had drawn half of a heart and you wanted to get the other side to be perfectly symmetrical, we can do that pretty easily by reflecting this time. So I'm going to grab the reflect tool, and if we alt click on the center, we want it to reflect over the vertical axes, and we can check off preview. Oh, I forgot to select it first with the black selection tool. It's a pretty common mistake. Alt click on the center, check off preview. Yeah, so now it's flipping across the vertical axes, and we can hit copy, and then we'll have two. And this is a great opportunity to talk about joining paths. So if two paths are not exact, or if two anchor points are not exactly on top of each other when we join them together into one shape, Illustrator will add a straight line between them. If they're exactly on top of each other, it will join them into one shape, no problem, right? Technically, even these are separate shapes. Um, so because because they are exactly on top of each other though, and we can double check that by right clicking and choosing average. I just selected both of the anchor points there before we choose average. I selected both of them with the white selection tool by dragging a little box around them, and now those are the only anchor points that are solid blue, right? These ones are solid white, so the solid blue ones are selected. Um, so right click average, this is going to make absolutely sure that they're exactly on top of each other. It's averaging the two anchor points in both directions. They probably already were exactly on top of each other. And then right click join. Okay, so if you want two anchor points to become one anchor point, right click average first and then right click join. For these two, since they aren't exactly on top of each other, if we don't average them first, right? If we just go to join, if we skip the average step, it puts a straight line between them. Okay, so it's a lot nicer if we choose average first and then join. And now there's only one there. Okay, so let's talk first about the paintbrush tool, I guess, and the blob brush tool. So they are slightly different, and you're going to want to use them for slightly different applications. Okay, so the paintbrush tool will include the stroke that you have on it, and it will make vectors that have that stroke on it. All right, so I'm just drawing. And when we click on these, we can see they are still made up of anchors and handles. Okay, and the paintbrush tool automatically draws, and it has whatever stroke you have on it automatically. The pencil tool, on the other hand, which is underneath the shaper tool, we'll talk about the shaper tool in 1 second. The pencil tool does not draw stuff with like the stroke applied to it, so it still draws vectors, but like if we deselect those vectors, it just draws like the standard vector where I think pretty much always will. where if you draw with the paintbrush tool, any like stroke that you have applied up here should apply, although apparently not, that one didn't count. Um, yeah, but you can apply these different brushes to it. Okay, so this is like the stroke type, which apparently has to be applied after you've made the vector. But if you're using the brush tool, you can use these different types of brushes, although I'm not sure I recommend them, that you get into them yet as a illustrator, because sometimes they can add in more colors and we want to keep everything really flat in textile design at least, but that just depends on what you want. So the brush tool can have those things applied to it, where the pencil tool, even if I have this applied and like I have the stroke really thick, if I draw with the pencil tool, oh, okay, it did apply the stroke, but it could not draw with like the brush that I had chosen. So that's kind of the difference there. Um, all right, the Blob Brush tool draws filled in shapes, okay, where the paintbrush tool draws lines. Okay, so you could draw a shape with the paintbrush tool. And we could try filling that with a color. But with the Blob Brush tool, it's best to work with a really thick brush on the Blob Brush tool. Oops, deselect first. Grab the Blob Brush tool, select a nice thick stroke. Oh, I think I'm doing it wrong actually. You double click on the Blob Brush tool to adjust the size of the brush. So a lot of tools have options if you double click on them, remember. So I'm just going to raise the size of the brush a bit. Beautiful. And now I can draw my heart and fill it in at the same time. It might have been even better to make the brush a little bit thicker to do a heart this size. But wherever I fill in is just going to become solid shape, solid color. Okay, so if I release, I missed a little spot right here, and if you have a shape selected, you can add to it with the Blob Brush tool at any time, as long as it's selected. So I can draw right there and add to that, or if I like wanted to make this come up a little bit higher, I could still do that. And you can see that this is a standard shape. Okay, so let's put that same fill on it. It has this one. The eyedropper tool, if you have a shape selected and then you choose the eyedropper tool and click on another shape, it will give you the color and stroke size of that shape, right? So that's handy for like copying the same colors from other shapes. Yeah, so if we had tried to do what we just did with the Blob Brush tool with just the regular brush tool, which is something I'll see a lot of people making that mistake. They'll put like a really big brush tool on, and then they will like try to fill in an area with the brush tool like this, where they like will scribble. And this is just a lot less editable. So let's actually right, this is not the way to use the Blob Brush tool, because things just get super funky. Okay, so it's not the way to use the brush tool. The brush tool is not for filling, it's for creating outlines. and then you can fill that shape. The Blob Brush tool is for filling in large shapes. And then like at the end you get an editable shape out of the Blob Brush tool instead of like a bunch of nonsense scribble lines like we would have gotten if we had tried to draw that with any other tool, and fill it in like that. Okay, so um, we've talked about the brush tool, the Blob Brush tool, the pencil tool, right? The pencil tool just makes standard lines. It can't have a brush stroke on it or any type of brush. The smooth tool, I believe, just smooths things out. So like if things are a little bit wonky in whatever you've drawn, you can run the smooth tool over it. I think you have to have it selected first. And then run the smooth tool over it, and it should like reduce the number of anchor points there. And you can adjust how much it smooths. Right, you want it really smooth or more accurate in the smooth tool options, which you get to by double clicking on the smooth tool. The path eraser tool, it acts like a lot like the eraser tool, which let's use the eraser tool. You have to have an object selected to be able to use the eraser tool on it. And you can double click on the eraser tool to make the brush size bigger. And then you can simply erase shapes, and it automatically closes the shape again and like makes it into a closed shape again, so it puts the outline all the way around it. Right? If we erase using the path eraser tool though, it will actually only erase the path. It won't erase the shape, and it won't erase the fill. It'll just create a gap in the path. If you erase a path that doesn't have a fill with the eraser tool, a similar effect will happen, but it's just slightly different, the path eraser tool, than the eraser tool, in that it will never erase the fill and it won't close the shape after. It just erases the line and it will leave the shape open actually. So let's talk, before we talk about the join tool, let's talk about the scissor tool and the knife tool. Where the eraser tool, right, would carve this shape up and then close the two shapes again and, you know, put the solid black line around both of them. If we did the same thing, if we made that same kind of action with the knife tool, it didn't remove any of the shape. It still put the solid black line all the way around, but we didn't carve any away like we do with the eraser tool. Okay, and the very last tool is the scissor tool. So the scissor tool can only be used on paths. It doesn't affect the fill particularly. So if we snip here and then we snip down here with the scissor tool, now we have two separate shapes, but they aren't closed shapes anymore. They don't have a solid black line here connecting these 2 points. They are open shapes. Okay. In general, I think that creating closed shapes is better practice, and it leads to just like better quality drawings. When I see like a solid line and then a non-solid line on like one edge, I know what's happened there. I know that it's a closed shape and that you might not have intentionally done that. For example, if you were drawing this heart and you made a mistake and you ended your line here, and then you drew like another little line and you made another mistake and you ended your line here again, you would end up with this shape in the middle. And some people will try to tell me that was my intention. I wanted to have this triangle in the middle of this heart. But really, this is an accident. And I get that impression when I see this kind of thing. So what we would do in this case is we would just choose these two anchor points by drawing a um, clicking and dragging a little box around them and then just choosing join. If you want to be absolutely proper, you would go average, okay, and then join, okay? Um, and we'd probably do it on this side too, just if we wanted to be, you know, really proper. Okay, so get familiar with joining things, and that leads us to our last tool. Okay, so we've talked about how you can join stuff by selecting two anchor points and choosing join, or choosing average and then join to make them into one anchor point. Um, but we can actually join things kind of more automatically with the join tool, which is something that I don't use this tool very often, but it's probably worth including in this. So if we took, for example, the arc tool and we made a few shapes and we wanted to join these all into one line and maybe into one shape eventually. Um, we'll draw one last line with the pencil tool. Come on. Oh, those probably are there, but they just don't have stroke on them. Okay, I'll use the brush tool. There we go. Okay, so even though this one is thicker, that really shouldn't matter in this situation. We want to select everything and move to the join tool. And what this does is it will take points that are near each other or lines that are intersecting and automatically turn them into one line with one anchor point at a corner. Okay, so we've selected everything and then I'm just going to draw kind of through this intersection and it automatically makes them into a shape. It's deselected them though, so I might have to reselect them, but I can do it to this one as well. It also works for shapes that are like close but aren't touching. So if I wanted to do these, if I wanted to join those two together, I would just select everything or select at least both of those shapes, everything that might be affected, that you might want to be affected by the join tool. And then I can just draw through them and it should automatically join them. And it doesn't leave extra anchor points around. It's a very convenient tool. So it's important to understand what it's doing, like in terms of right-click join and in terms of it's making all those anchor points into one. But it's very handy. So let's try to join the rest of this into one shape really quick. Join tool. There we go. Should be the last two. Let's look at this with fill on it right now. So we still have this like extra little piece, and we definitely don't want that. So let's see if the join tool will take it right off. Nope. I wonder if it doesn't work for the end of a shape like this. So we might have to manually cut or erase that shape or something. I am going to, I guess, use the eraser tool and just erase up to a certain point, and we'll see what we've been left with here. Control plus and control minus to zoom in and out. Oh, it made it into a closed shape when I did that. Okay, so that is all of the drawing tools that I wanted to talk about, I believe. Um, Please let me know if you have any questions. I know it's a lot to take in, but there's so many different ways to make marks in Illustrator, and there's always more than one way to do everything. So please let me know if you have any questions. Bye!